So we don't normally go out there and cover material like this on the channel, but I thought now was as good a time as any to start talking about the future, talk about the prospects, talk about the guys who are cooking in Abbotsford, because earlier this evening we had ourselves a game between the Abbotsford Canucks and the Henderson Silver Knights, the Vegas Golden Knights AHL affiliate. Abby ended up winning the game 8-3, which is a pretty good score, and we had ourselves a record being broken in this one showcase. To get forward with what exactly that was, let's go out there and look at the goal summary, because Abbotsford, winning, of course, 8-3, had themselves a bunch of goals, and the majority of them were actually scored in the first period. Firstly, you had Linus Carlsson with his 15th on the year in 51 seconds, mind you. All it took was 51 seconds for Abbotsford to go out there and lead 1-0. But then, just 9 seconds after that, you had Aatu Raty go out there and make it 2-0. Raty, with his 14th, gives the Abbotsford Canucks the 2-0 lead, and then Raty, 4 minutes later, goes out there and gives the Canucks a 3-0 lead. This was on the power play, Abby taking advantage of the opportunity, assisted by Filip Johansson and Linus Carlsson. So an all-European goal right here, scored at the hands of Aatu Raty. Then the Henderson Silver Knights responded with a goal of their own. Brayden Brisson, assisted from Grigory Denisenko, gave the Henderson Silver Knights the one goal to get things going for them, only for the Henderson Silver Knights to get into a bit of penalty trouble. There were cross-checking penalties, roughing penalties, boarding penalties over here too, and as a result, you saw Abbotsford respond with 2 straight power play goals. Tristan Nielsen from Linus Carlsson and Aatu Raty, and Sheldon Dries from Aatu Raty and Filip Johansson. Now, the period did end off with a Henderson Silver Knights goal. Grigory Denisenko with his 16th on the season, assisted by Brayden Brisson. After the first period, the score in the game was 5-2 Abbotsford. Arshdeep Bains and Mark Gatcomb then scored in the second, and then in the third you had goals from Gatcomb and Brayden Brisson. But when it comes to the Aatu Raty show, this is really what we're talking about here. Because with his 4 points in the first 20 minutes worth of play, Aatu Raty has established a new franchise record for points in one period with the Abbotsford Canucks. Now, I get it. You could say, wait a minute, the Abbotsford Canucks haven't really been around for a while. Like, what do you mean record? Of course it's a record. Like, there aren't really too many benchmarks to go out there and compare it to. But still, this is a pretty good thing. This gives us an opportunity to not only talk about the Abby Canucks, but to also go over Aatu Raty as a whole, because his entire profile has been pretty under the radar, I'd say, for a lot of Canucks fans that are focusing on, you know, the main team. But this is a pretty big indicator that alongside of the Elias Petterssons, alongside of the Lekaramakis, alongside of some of the other guys who have been doing good things like Tom Willander, there are some really good prospects the Canucks have just in their backyard. Of course, we had already talked about Arshdeep Bains making his call-up debut with the Vancouver Canucks. I think a lot of people kind of concluded that more time in Abbotsford will be beneficial to him, but for Aatu Raty, you could say that he's been cooking very much as well in the Abbotsford Canucks. Now, I will say, big shout out over to Elite Prospects, because they did update these stats pretty quickly here. Aatu Raty has his 41 points in 60 games played, 15 goals and 26 assists, which is in line with what the AHL website goes out there and labels for Raty's production. But it is kind of intriguing here, because Raty did come off of this 4-point game, but it is his only few points that he has gotten in his last 5 games. So Raty, in his last 4 games before tonight, had 0 points. But eventually get the 2 goals, get the 2 assists in tonight's showcase, and everything looks pretty good. In fact, he only had 6 points in his last 10 games, so if you remove tonight's game, Aatu Raty's last 9 games beforehand would have seen him get only 2 assists in the process. So this game against Henderson seemed to have really been a big step forward for Raty. We kind of needed a game like this to bolster him back up into the spotlight, because when it comes to the Abbotsford Canucks, of course, we recognize that Raty is a good player. We recognize that he was supposed to be a first overall caliber guy in the 2021 NHL Draft, but His draft season was very bad, which is why he slipped all the way to the second round, only to be taken by the Islanders. But for Raty himself, this is a pretty poetic thing to be going out there and talking about, because earlier in today's show, we did make a video talking about Bo Horvat on the New York Islanders and how he's been pretty good. Lots of people in the Isles fan base have been clamoring over and over about Bo Horvat. And realistically, for Raty being one of the main pieces in return for Bo, you kind of hope that this guy pans out to the way that he can, potentially as a middle to bottom six, all situations kind of center with some offensive flair. But even if he doesn't become that, there still are some other good players in the Abbotsford Canucks system that we can pay attention to. Arshdeep Bains has 48 points in 51 games played, so he is right at that point-per-game mark. So is Linus Carlsson. Sheldon Dries is a point per game as well. And then you have Aatu Raty there with his development going a little bit slower than you would prefer, but he's still doing all right. Vasily Podkolzin with his 28 points in 44 games played. He got the call-up, but not necessarily because he is a super amazing point producer. Everybody recognizes that Podkolzin has more value to his game beyond just the goals and the assists. But with this in mind, the Vancouver Canucks, or the Abbotsford Canucks, excuse me, do have quite a few intriguing prospects that are doing some good work. And with Elias Pettersson setting to join this team a little bit later, not to mention Christian Felton, the recent Vancouver Canucks signee, there will be some new names, new faces to pay attention to as the Abbotsford Canucks go out there and try to make a splash in the postseason. If you go over to the AHL standings right now, it's taken a while to load, but still, Abbotsford is still trying to remain competitive. I don't want to say their playoff odds are like guaranteed. They're 31, 23, and 6 with 68 points. It's a pretty big near tie, actually. You've got 4 teams only separated by 3 points to take over that 4th spot in the Pacific. But then, of course, Colorado, Tucson, Coachella Valley, they all have much bigger leads on these other teams. So we'll see if the Abby Canucks are able to force themselves a postseason berth, if that's actually possible. Who really knows? But for now, they still have some guys that are worth paying attention to. And Aatu Raty going out there and setting the record for most Abbotsford Canucks points in a period with 2 goals and 2 assists. That is a pretty good mark. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Aatu Raty and tonight's Abbotsford Canucks game. I know there are a lot of people that frequently go out there and visit the Abbotsford Canucks because, you know, it's just a drive down the road, right? So 8-3 win over the Henderson Silver Knights. If any of y'all were actually there watching the game, what are your thoughts on Aatu Raty's 4-point night? What are your thoughts on his 4-point period, I guess I should say instead? 2 goals, 2 assists, all in the first, setting a record. He didn't end up getting any more offense after that, but that's okay because, I mean, he still was the first star of the game. And do you think this was something that Aatu Raty needed? He only had 2 points in his previous 9 games before tonight's action, so was this really the step in the right direction that he needed to propel him forward heading into the AHL playoffs? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Aatu Raty, the Abby Canucks, the Vancouver Canucks prospects, and how they're all developing. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.